Hello, welcome. We're here from Germany at the beautiful Malaga for our mobile care meeting investigating the state of live-in carers that are mobile within Europe. In Germany, most of the caregivers we receive are from Eastern European countries, and in the past year, based on this EU project, we investigated most of the stakeholders that are involved in this process. So we had quantitative and qualitative parts of our research. We talked to more than 20 stakeholders in the scene of live-in caregiving. We have visited them in their countries and talked to agencies within Germany, as well as families and caregivers. We also conducted a survey to understand the matter better. And today I want to give you a brief summary of what we found and what we are suggesting based on our findings. So the first thing that we noticed based through all stakeholder groups is there's a huge amount of legal uncertainty in this field. So whomever you are, you might not really know whether you are in a legal model or not. Even if you decide to, for example, employ a caregiver on your own as a household, you might have the problem that you can't keep the working times that the German law requires you to hold up. If you choose a model that, for example, uses an A1 form that allows you to use a caregiver from a different European country posted legally into another country, you might not know whether this person is actually permitted to get this A1 form from their home country, because do they really do a bit of their work in their home country so that they have employment in both of these countries? You can't really be sure. Then you have to keep in mind that you have to pay the minimum wage. We had in Germany a huge cry out some years ago when a caregiver asks for the remuneration of their time where they are waiting to actually work, which they do in the households of people. That is actually the definition of live-in care. So as a family, you might, even if you use one of those models, be in the insecurity of whether you probably have to pay something back. If you're an agency, that's the same problem. And if you are one of the caregivers, you might also not know in which legal system you are active at the moment, who is responsible for your social security, and so on. So this is a huge problem in this field. And the unfortunate solution is that many of the stakeholders decide, since they don't know how to move within the system in a legal way, they decide to go to the black market. Because if you don't know whether you're legal or not, if you try to do it legal, then why even bother, right? So that is a huge problem that we found when talking to all of these people. A cry for regulation, a cry for guidance on how to provide these services in a legal manner that gives me security that I actually do it correctly. That said, there is a high rate of informality. The stakeholders suggest that it's up to 90% in this market that works black. So that is a huge problem that we need to tackle. Also, a huge part of social security that we could gain as a country if we find a way to legally employ these people. However, if you legally employ these people, we need to change, at least in Germany and probably all over Europe, the kind of employment, how we can employ them, because the German time to rest between their working placements is usually way too long for a domestic caregiver to keep. Just imagine, you might have the nicest job at a family's home where you only work 2 or 3 hours. I know this is not the reality, but let's just bear with me for a moment. Where you only work 2 or 3 hours a day, but those 2 or 3 hours a day, you have to do them in a very fragmented manner where you don't have 11 hours of rest in between. This is not legal in the German Arbeitszeitgesetz, the German law of working times, which obviously makes formalization of the sector more or less impossible. So we need a change here. At the same time, we can't allow all of those caregivers who pay attention to our elderly people, who give care to our elderly people, leave them in the situation to not receive social services themselves once they become elderly. So we can't not give them social security in either our country or their home country. So we have to allow them to, at the one hand, avoid our Arbeitszeitgesetz, the working time law in Germany, but at the same time give them social security, which is then an employment like self-employment. So we have a mix between characteristics of self-employment and at the same time employment like securities, which gives those people the chance to not be not cared for when they are old. And if you look to Austria, for example, they have implemented the system. So there are good examples in Europe out there, but a lot of the countries are not really eager to implement such systems and solutions, which is probably because at the moment in this black and gray area market, there's not much money to pay for the governments. And at the same time, there is not much to gain for a lot of people who would have to enter the system. So it's a cheap solution, how it is at the moment, for a very expensive problem. And we don't have at the moment a formal framework that would allow us to care for those at least 300,000 people that are relying on live-in healthcare at the moment. So this is a real huge problem that we need to tackle. To do this, to probably allow them into a social security system, at the same time, we need to take care of the price of live-in care, which requires us to integrate some type of reimbursement scheme that allows those people who pay live-in caregivers to get some money from the state or some other way of providing healthcare that they can pay for. In Germany, we started with the so-called paragraph 45A SGB 11, where agencies are allowed to get some reimbursement for their work of dealing with the caregiver placement, caregiver selection, caregiver quality assessment, and doing the mediation between caregivers and the families, which is a huge job. Most of those caregivers will not spend more than 2 months at the family's place. So you need some organization in between. And that is basically something that we need at a European level, because as you learned, this is a European problem. It's nothing we can solve just for one country and then hope that it trickles down to all the other countries. It's probably something we need to solve European-wide, because the caregivers, obviously, since they're mobile, they move to the country where they find the most favorable conditions for their work placement, and where they get the nicest families and family situations. So if we want to have a solution without breaking our care services in Europe, this must be a European solution that the member states of the European Union adapt step by step.